Hello. It's Monday, and for the last few Mondays, we've been talking about change. So, a couple Mondays ago, we talked about the role of acceptance in dealing with change and embracing change because we need to accept it because change is happening. We talked last week about growth mindset as opposed to fixed mindset and being someone who really sees change as an opportunity and can follow their curiosity. And this week, I want to talk about compassion. Specifically, I want to talk about self compassion. But first, I want you to imagine something with me. Imagine you're sitting in your living room, and you are with someone you love dearly. It can be your spouse or a child or your best friend or your mother or your dad, whatever. And you're sitting there, and there's a third person in the room, a very familiar person, and that person is asking your loved one questions. Okay, we can deal with that, right? But the questions start to take on a slightly different tone, and their questions become a bit rough. And they say things like, what were you thinking when you did that? And how have you ended up back here again? And have you even considered what this is going to do in this situation? And you start feeling a bit bristly, like, hey, stop talking to my mother or my sister or my cat like that. So we can all imagine that, right? And most of us, I don't know about all of you, but if I love you and someone's doing that, I'm going to literally say, you can either change the tone of your question and be more compassionate, or you can stop talking. Those are the options, right? Literally, those are the options. You cannot keep talking to this person I love in that voice. So now, imagine the last time you had that conversation with yourself. Yikes. For years, the voice in my head that asked those kinds of questions was very bitchy. She was hardcore. Over the years, as I really started imagining, like, if that voice talked to my best friend that way, I would be livid. And I would come in to save the day, right? Put on my cape and come save the day. So, let's talk about self-compassion. That voice often has a role, right? The voice that steps in and starts asking those hard questions is often swooping in because you're in the midst of change and decision making and it wants to keep you safe. So it's a threat system in your brain firing. When the voice is so harsh, though, it's very hard for us to listen to it. And we either shut down and avoid the change, which is not good, or we push past it and avoid the warning, right? And there's a balance we have to strike here. For most of us, quite frankly, self-compassion is not something that we're doing too much of. Let's be honest. So I would challenge you that one of the best ways that you can embrace change is when the voice gets really loud, whether it's external voices talking to you, because tell them to go away and shut up, or your internal voice being really hard on you, you're going to respond with compassion. You're going to respond with kindness. You're going to say, I hear you and I understand that you're nervous and you want to step in and help me, but you're not being very nice about it. So, what does that look like, right? What are some things you can do? So first of all, you can literally tell yourself, hey, I don't like how you're talking to me. Like, literally, say it out loud if you have to. That's not nice. It's not nice. The more I've done that, the more my critical voice is just not quite as bitchy. She still has many questions, but she's just not quite as aggressive in how she comes at me. She's learned that I don't listen very well to those kinds of questions. But there are other things you can do, right? So again, one of the first things you can do is really acknowledge the feeling you're having, like, oh, I'm scared, or I'm nervous, or I'm concerned I'm making a mistake, right? Just acknowledge it. That's a big step. Then another thing is to practice self-care, right? So I've said this a number of times, but you have to be taking care of the basics to make good decisions and to handle change. So you need to be getting rest. You need to be eating well, drinking water, getting some sunshine, breathing deeply. Like, those are things you have to have and practice in order to make sure you don't bottom out in the midst of change and uncertainty. You need to practice celebrating small wins, right? Like, how do you make sure, and I talk more about that on my blog, but celebrating small wins is really, really important in this process. And then fundamentally being kinder to yourself, as we just talked about, and sometimes seeking support. So go over to my blog and check out my blog today, which really outlines and discusses these steps in more detail. It's leahfarmer.com. And if you need some support, I would be happy to be a coach to you in that, either a life coach or a professional coach, helping you really navigate that kindness you can show up with when you're navigating through change. So I will be happy to do that. If you want help with that, you can go to leahfarmercoaching.com and find the service that most aligns with what you need, and I will be happy to coach you. In the meantime, if that voice sneaks in, tell it I said to be nice.